Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 10th Field Notes live event. My name is Russell Almaraz, and I am the GIS specialist in Davis, California, and the Field Notes regional representative for the Southwest Soil Survey region. As a regional representative, I serve on the Field Notes Review Committee. The review committee solicits and selects topics for each webinar. We have selected two exciting topics for you today, and we encourage you to ask questions at any time using the Q&A panel. The Q&A panel should open by default. However, if for some reason your Q&A panel is not open, simply click on the question mark icon located on the right side of your screen. For closed captions, turn on the live caption button located in the lower right corner. Today's session is being recorded. Recorded sessions are available in Teams on the Field Notes channel and the National Soil Survey Center's YouTube channel. Again, thank you for joining us, and I hope you enjoy today's session. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Dave Hoover to tell you more about today's webinar. Dave?
Thank you, Russ. This is Dave Hoover, Director of the National Soil Survey Center, and I also welcome you to the 10th Field Notes webinar. This is great that there have been 10 of them so far. I was thinking about this when I was watching, probably like a lot of you, you cruise different videos on YouTube or on the web, and I was saying, I would watch this stuff. There's no other place on the web that there are a collection of videos about field activities going on in soils and ecological work like there are here at our website. And we've done this for 10 times now, so almost going on a year now for this. I think this is just wonderful. I even get my wife to watch a few of these with me every now and then. So I think there's entertainment for all ages and all interests. So settle back, and we will start our first presentation today with Kristi Mingus out of the Price, Utah office, which I have been to, speaking on the Three Creeks Grazing Consolidation Dynamic Soil Properties project details. Kristi, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Dave, for the introduction. Let me get my slides up. Like Dave said, my name is Kristi Mingus. I'm the MLRA Soil Survey Leader in Price, Utah, and I'm excited for the Price office to take over the Field Notes webinars today. Miles and I are both coming at you with some interesting things that we've been working on. I'm going to talk to you today about our Dynamic Soil Properties project in Rich County, Utah. And we refer to this project as the Three Creeks Grazing Consolidation Project. Our study sites are located on an area of land referred to as Three Creeks in northeastern Utah. This semi-arid landscape consists of rolling hills of black and Wyoming big sagebrush, and a few small creeks carry water through the area, flowing from west to east. Like much of the public land in the western United States, the Three Creeks area has been grazed since the mid-1800s when pioneers settled the area. This area encompasses 140,000 acres of predominantly public lands, where historically 38 ranchers have managed 3,200 cows and 5 bands of sheep on 10 grazing allotments. And if you're not familiar, allotment refers to a designated area of public land that's available for livestock to graze on if you obtain a permit from federal or state lands managing the area. Permits on grazing allotments are typically up for renewal every 10 years. The past 20 years hold significant history for Three Creeks. In 2001, permit renewal on grazing allotments was protested by environmental groups who were concerned about water quality issues and land degradation. This acted as a catalyst for change. Ranchers felt an urgent need to protect both their livelihood and the land. In 2007, after many iterations of late-night chats refining plans on the backs of napkins and finally on paper, the plans for the Three Creeks Allotment Consolidation Project were formed. The 38 ranchers proposed consolidating their 10 grazing allotments into just one, forming an LLC, which would act as the permittee on the allotment. The primary benefit of consolidating these allotments is increased flexibility. Instead of, as shown in this graphic, being one rancher being kind of locked into a smaller area of land with a set time and timing of grazing, for example, an area grazed in, say, May and June every year, the LLC could instead move their cattle around with more flexibility within the parameters laid out in their grazing permit. Herein lies the significance of this project. We don't know of another area on public lands where such a large-scale allotment consolidation project has taken place and is managed by an LLC to increase some flexibility in this grazing rotation. In order to make this change, the ranchers proposed their ideas to the BLM and Forest Service, and a National Environmental Policy Act process was started in 2010. So during this process, each resource on the land is assessed to determine potential impacts. After quite a long waiting period of 8 years, it was found that no significant impact would be had on local resources, which gave the ranchers a green light to start putting up a few more fences and water sources on this land. This construction is mainly complete now, and ranchers have been phasing into their new management practices since 2021. So in order to better understand what this change will look like for the Three Creeks management, it's useful to understand 4 grazing principles that impact soil and rangeland health. First, time. How long is the land grazed? Grazing for 2 weeks will impact the land differently than grazing for 4 months. Second, timing. What time of year is the land grazed? If the land is grazed in May versus July, vegetation will be hit at different growth stages, and the soil will respond differently to trampling depending on how wet it is. Third, intensity. How many cows are grazing on the land? And fourth, frequency. How often is the land grazed? Is it hit every year, or are there occasional rest years? So now I want to show you how these 4 different grazing principles were managed in the past on Three Creeks, and then show you what they're going to do moving forward. So this is a map of the Three Creeks area. The yellow is BLM land, white is private, blue is state, green is Forest Service. And take a look first at that northern section that's outlined in orange. This area had been historically grazed with a season-long continuous grazing practice. Each year, time of grazing in this pasture was 4 months. Timing was May through August, which is the entire season that the cattle graze on these specific public lands, and then they're pasture fed the rest of the year. Frequency was every year. No fences divide this area into subpastures, so the cattle have free rein over this area for the entire 4 months. The western area, outlined in pink, is the early deferred rotation system. Time of grazing in this year was 1.5 to 2 months. Timing was May and June. Frequency was every year. So then after the cows grazed this area outlined in pink, they would be moved to the eastern area outlined in blue, which is slightly higher in elevation. This area outlined in blue is the late deferred rotation, where time of grazing was 1.5 to 2 months in July and August. So the time, timing, and frequency was historically held constant in each pasture for this older system. So the vegetation was getting hit at the same time every year in each pasture. This is in contrast to the new management system, which we call a rest rotation system. So this rest rotation system will vary in timing and frequency for any given pasture. As an example that you can see in this graphic, one pasture could be grazed in May in the first year, in July in the second year, and then in the third year have a rest. This will ensure that vegetation and soil experience grazing pressure at different times each year, attempting to help improve rangeland health. And so every year, 20% of the pastures will rest, which really hasn't happened since the pioneers came to this area. A private ranch south of Three Creeks had implemented a similar rest rotation system about 30 years ago, so the ranchers felt confident that it could work for them too. The private ranch also has similar soil and vegetation to Three Creeks, which allowed us to study soil series and ecological site pairs among 4 different grazing practices. So this rest rotation system was looked at the private ranch, and the older early deferred, late deferred, and continuous systems were looked at Three Creeks. Just for a quick comparison of the two, Three Creeks has been transitioning to the rest rotation system since 2021. Will support 2 herds of cattle on 25 pastures. And for a note on grazing intensity, which we haven't talked about too much yet, will support 0.2 to 0.4 animal unit months per hectare. So just a note, the change in grazing management didn't include a change in animal unit months per hectare on the Three Creeks area. So in contrast, the private ranch has used rest rotation grazing since 1983, supports 6 herds on 100 pastures, and supports 0.6 to 0.7 animal unit months per hectare. So the private ranch receives slightly less precipitation than Three Creeks, and it also supports more cattle. We were approached by Chris Hulvey, the founder at a nonprofit called Working Lands Conservation, in 2020 to see if we could help her figure out how soils were changing across the landscape at Three Creeks. Chris and her crew have been monitoring the impact that grazing management has on vegetation and water quality in this area, and they wanted to have a better feel for soils as well. As the Price Soils Office learned more about this project, we realized it could be a great setup for a DSP study. Our objectives were to determine differences in dynamic soil properties for 2 soil series under the 4 grazing management practices I just introduced. A second and equally important objective emerged as we got started on this project because we started getting feedback from the state and field NRCS offices that they were having issues with the soil maps in Rich County. So they requested that we update these maps when we have time. We realized that this DSP project would serve as a preliminary data collection for a future update project in Rich County, which is great. It's always good to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. We chose 2 soil series that were extensive across the 4 grazing practices and were known to be in hotspots of cattle grazing. Curl, a coarse loamy calcic haploxerol under Wyoming big sagebrush, and Solac, loamy skeletal lithic xeric torreorthents under black sagebrush. For each of these soil series and each management, we collected 10 reps, and that was 6 full soil descriptions and pits, plus 4 cores. And we didn't look at Solac on the private ranch, which is the rest rotation system. So that's just a note you'll notice in the figures later. To capture baseline data, we went to the field in 2021, dug soil pits, and described these pits on site. We collected samples at each pit for basic soil analysis, including pH, EC, particle size analysis, calcium carbonate, and calcium carbonate equivalent to. We're excited to compare lab data analyzed by Working Lands Conservation, the nonprofit that we're partnered with results that we get from running samples on the MIR in Region 4 in Missoula. So this will hopefully help us verify how accurately the MIR predicts soil properties in this area and also give us a chance to refine the local model if needed. We want to use the MIR to help us get more accurate data when we move into update mapping in this area. And we also believe it could be a good tool for ranchers to gain insight into their soil properties in a quick, affordable way. So in addition to this MIR and lab comparison, we're particularly interested in bulk density in this project because the cow traffic can cause compaction. We collected cores of known volume for bulk density and sent a subset of clod samples to KSSL for more accurate measurements. Our partners at Working Lands Conservation measured organic carbon. They're embarking on a larger scale soil carbon project in this area. So we really wanted to use this baseline sampling effort to capture impacts of historic grazing practices on soil health, and also to highlight any areas or any trends that we see in this baseline data that might warrant further investigation. We hope to resample these metrics every 5 years to see if properties level out or change with the new management system. So will there be any changes in soil health? In addition to the less frequently measured metrics, a few annual measurements will be made too. A lot of this work will be done with our partners, by our partners at Working Lands Conservation, but we're planning on helping out whenever we have time and resources to do so. So site photos, qualitative notes, and quantitative observations will be recorded at each site to note if and how change is occurring with time. 17 indicators of rangeland health will be assessed, and infiltration data will also be collected. In 2021, we used a single ring infiltrometer, but now the Price office just received 5 Saturos, and we're really excited to see how we can get better data with the Saturos. So instead of just getting kind of an infiltration metric, we'll be able to measure saturated hydraulic conductivity, as well as hopefully back calculate and get some sorptivity estimates as well. So here's just some photos of us collecting samples and observing sites at 3 Creeks. That platy soil structure that you can see in the bottom middle is pretty common of what we were seeing in a lot of sites out there. So we saw a lot of platy soil structure. In our data, we expected to see lower bulk density and faster infiltration in healthier sites. We anticipated that the rest rotation system on the private ranch and possibly areas that weren't hit in May and June would fall into this category. We expected to see higher bulk density and slower infiltration in less healthy sites. And we anticipated that the early deferred grazing system, which is the land hit when the soil has more water from runoff and vegetation is still young, would be more compact and have lower infiltration. We also anticipated that the continuous grazing system would fall into this category. So what did we actually see? This is the bulk density graph, and in each of the following graphs, the first green column will refer to the rest rotation system. The pink column is early deferred, the blue column is late deferred, and the orange is continuous. The first set refers to curl soil series under Wyoming big sagebrush, and the second set refers to Solac soil series under black sagebrush. Notice that in both cases, the early season system had higher bulk density than the late season. There was a significant difference in bulk density between early and late season grazing before the data was split out by soil series. So this trend follows kind of what we were expecting to see, but just when you're comparing the early season to the late season, there was a bump in bulk density, or potentially those soils were a little bit more compact in early season than late season. Now, did infiltration trends follow trends in bulk density as we expected? Trends in both cases for curl and Solac did show that early season had slower infiltration than late season. This wasn't a significant difference, but it does spark my interest that the trend shows that early season had higher bulk density and slower infiltration than the late season grazing. I do want to note that our infiltration metric is hard to compare across sites due to high variability and differences in the soil moisture on site just when you show up. And so hopefully our data in 2022 and beyond will be a little bit more accurate with this. And we hope to have more extensive, or when I say we, Working Lands Conservation is going to be measuring infiltration quite a bit more. And so we'll have better data to show in the future. And here are some organic carbon percentages. Working Lands Conservation measured organic carbon on an elemental analyzer after acid fumigation. And this graph shows samples that were binned into fixed depths, or data that's binned into fixed depths. So in this graph, the top 10 centimeters is shown at the top darker block in the figure. And then as you move your way down into the lighter rectangles, that's at the lower depths in the soil pit. There was a significant difference in surface organic carbon in the early season and late season systems in big sagebrush. And interestingly, this trend follows what we've seen elsewhere in the data. In the early season grazing, where cows grazed the spongy ground, it had higher bulk density, some trends showing slower infiltration, and lower surface carbon when compared to the late season grazing. So did we see what we expected? And I would say in the case of just comparing the early deferred system to the late deferred system, we saw data that made some sense, with the early season having higher bulk density and lower surface organic carbon, likely because it had grazing pressure when it had more moisture and was susceptible to compaction. As our partners at Working Lands Conservation continue to collect data, I'm curious to see whether the trends that we noticed with this first look at the landscape solidify or not. So we understand that this is a large and complex landscape, and attributing differences we see to grazing management isn't necessarily a straightforward process. But we do think that this kind of first look project was a great way for us to do a dynamic soil properties assessment that will help Working Lands Conservation determine which parameters they'd like to study in which areas as they move forward. And to quickly highlight other research going on in this collaboration, Working Lands Conservation is continuing a larger study to understand soil carbon across the landscape, as well as impacts of grazing management on riparian areas. And that's one thing that NRCS helped out with a little bit as well, was in the riparian areas, there's actually exclosures where cows can't get in. And so we did some pits inside and outside exclosures that I didn't show data from today. And then other resources evaluated by various entities include cattle, water, vegetation, wildlife, and humans. So I'm excited for this kind of holistic approach. Rancher interviews will be conducted on challenges and successes of this allotment consolidation project. And all of this data combined will hopefully just serve as a roadmap, including what worked as well as what didn't work, like bumps in the road, for anyone interested in potentially following suit in the future. So I want to say a big thanks to all of the many hands that helped out on this project. Megan Nasto specifically, she analyzed most of the soil data. And so with KSSL being kind of backlogged, it was great to be able to have this partnership where we're doing data sharing and resource sharing together. And then before opening up the floor for questions, I want to quickly say the Price office is looking for 2 soil scientists and 1 ecological site specialist as details this summer. We're working on an initial soil survey in the Ashley National Forest and would love to have your help. So feel free to shoot me an email if this sounds like something that you'd be interested in. And I also have colleagues in Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming that are looking for details as well. And those are really fun crews led by great soil scientists. So feel free to reach out to them as well.
Thank you, Kristi. I hope you get some takers on that. It's beautiful country.
Me too. Yeah, it's great out here.
And it was neat to be able to hear about grasses that I know. So, and sagebrush that I know. There was 1 question so far, and hopefully there'll be a couple more while you answer this one. So where are the cattle when not on the allotment? And will that site be monitored as well?
Yeah, good question. So they're pasture fed for the rest of the year, and we're not looking into what people do with the cattle when they're on their private land.
Okay. Give just another minute for folks to submit questions. Do you think there'd be any difference between the results on sheep grazed versus cattle grazed lands?
I think that there probably would be, just with hoof size and maybe some preferences in what they're eating. And really, when we're looking into this project, we're focusing on cattle, and we have hotspot data from where cows are moving and from pasture to pasture. So it helps us kind of determine where we want to take samples. Like, we don't want to sample in areas where they're not hanging out. But I do think that there would be a difference in just compaction and and stuff like that.
I agree. So I'm not seeing any more questions pop up, but I will remind people that if you do add questions to it, they will be answered and posted on the Field Notes website. So
Awesome.
a big thanks, Kristi. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
I will remind folks that the next webinar is March 8th, the 11th one. And if you want to be part of that 11th one, get in touch with your regional representatives for Field Notes and suggest a topic. I said it's great to be able to see what's going on across the country. I think we've had a good geographic distribution so far, and we can get even a better geographic and topic distribution in the webinars to come. So mark March 8th on your calendars, and then of course that'll get sent out also. Our next presentation will be Miles Coker, also from Price. As you heard, this is a Price Utah focused webinar today. Miles will be talking on the Emery County initial soil survey work in fiscal year 21. Miles, I turn it over to you.
Thanks, Dave. I'm gonna. Cool. Hello. Thanks for introducing me, Dave. My name's Miles Coker, and yeah, I'm here to talk about initial soil survey work we did in Emery County. I'm going to give a little background on the area, some of the issues we had, and how the field season went. UT 625 is the name for the initial soil survey work in Emery County, and it is located in Land Resource Region D. It has 3 different MLRAs, 34B, 35, and in the top right corner, 48A. The UT 625 is located in southeast Utah. It encompasses much of the San Rafael Swell, which is right here, and part of the Book Cliffs in the top right section, which is right here. It has 1,352,522 acres, and this survey was started in the 1980s, but it was never published. It was restarted recently in 2017, getting boots on the ground in 2018. Specifically, this last field year, we focused on the Book Cliff section of UT 625, which is the top right portion right here. The Book Cliffs has 2 different rivers going through it. The Price River, which goes west to east, and the Green River, which goes north to south, right along this border. Book Cliffs are known for its dissected plateaus and cliff faces. It's called the Book Cliffs because the top looks like a bookshelf. This part of the Book Cliff portion of the soil survey holds 121,503 acres, and it has an elevation that ranges between 5,500 and 8,500 feet. This is a photo I took while in the field facing north, and it just shows you how pretty it is and all the dissected cliffs. So a little bit of the climate background on the Book Cliffs. We mostly have desert, semi-desert, and upland in here. There's mostly desert and semi-desert, a little bit of upland in the top. These are terms specific to Utah. I understand that everyone else, for the most part, uses typic arid for desert, ustic arid for semi-desert, and arid ustic for upland. This climate schema helped me guide us on what soils we would see and what vegetation we would see. The geology of the Book Cliffs is quite extensive. It can have its own presentation, and there's so much information on it. I just wanted to focus on 3 different members in the Book Cliffs that I felt like I saw a lot. This KBM, which is the Blue Castle Sandstone member and Mudstone member of the Price River Formation, which was formed in the Upper Cretaceous period, is the Book Cliff caps. These are the light gray, yellow brown sandstone caps at the very top. The second member I'd like to highlight would be the upper part of the Mingus Shale. This is the dark gray, salty soil at the base of the Book Cliffs. It's very famous for it. The third member I'd like to talk about is the Flagstaff member of the Green River Formation, which was formed in the Paleocene, and the North Horn Formation, which was also formed in the Paleocene era. And this is the red, brown, mudstone, sandstone caps that we also see in the Book Cliffs. Blue Castle sandstone member and mudstone member of the Price River Formation is shown right here, just a little cap sandstone cliff. The Flagstaff member, Green River Formation, North Horn Formation, formed in the Paleocene era. I just talked about it, but this was a little photo I tried to take of it. It's this little red band right here. And the upper part of the Mingus Shale, which was formed in the Upper Cretaceous period, is this dark gray base of the cliffs. This is a close-up of the Beckwith Plateau, which is the southern part of the Book Cliffs, right below the Price River. The KMU is the Mingus Shale, which shows how thick it is of the area, and the KBM is the Blue Castle sandstone member and mudstone member of the Price River Formation, the little sandstone cliffs at the top. The Book Cliffs, we see a variety of vegetation. We see Douglas firs, four-ring saltbush, juniper, pinions, ephedra, greasewood, cottonwoods, Wyoming big sagebrush, and Salina wild rye. So now we got the background on the Book Cliffs. I want to talk about how I joined and how my first year went with this initial soil survey. I joined in March of 2021. First year as a soil scientist, and my boss, MLRA soil survey leader Kristi Mingus, helped catch me up to speed. She gave me a bunch of background of the area and showed me these two maps: the alternative mapping, which was a DSSM project done by Suzanne, and this historical mapping, which was done by the NRCS in the 1980s. Analyzing these maps, we found out they were developed using landscape, landform, temperature, moisture class, aspect, slope, vegetation, and elevation. The alternative mapping used map unit concepts from surrounding surveys, and this was done by Meredith Albers. And the historical mapping was done in the traditional sense. They hand drew it, and it was only recently digitized in 2019 by our Mark Roloff. So using both of these maps as guides, we used them both as guides for our survey. So after learning the area, I had to figure out how to access the area. The Book Cliffs is quite remote. It's very steep cliffs and there's not a lot of roads. There's 3 roads specifically: the Turtle Canyon Road, the Range Creek Road, and the Price River Road. We scouted out the Turtle Canyon Road and it was drivable, but very rough. We couldn't go past 10 miles an hour, and it took us around 3 hours from our Price field office, which is slightly up here if this map was extended, to the Range Creek field station. The Range Creek Road is better, but it was actually snowed in when we were going to head up, and then it eventually got washed out by rain during the summer. And this Price River Road extends to the southern part of the Book Cliffs. You just have to cross the Price River, and you get access to here, so it depends how high the river is. And we tried scouting this out, but it turns out this was actually reclaimed. So this left most of the Book Cliffs having to be accessed by hiking. So in order to figure out lodging to stay up there, in order to deal with the 3 hours of driving, we contacted the Range Creek field station. Corinne Springer, she's the Range Creek site manager, and she manages the Range Creek field station and their archaeology courses up there. She allowed us to stay in 2 separate bunkhouses due to COVID. Luckily enough, there were 3 buildings, so she stayed in this red pink building, and then Kristi and I could stay in 2 separate buildings. This is a very pretty place. She actually had a flock of wild turkeys that she fed every night that lived in the cottonwoods, which is really cool. And then she had this 5-gallon bucket of Indian rice grass that she harvested by hand, which I thought was crazy. And then this is a little homestead. Now that we had lodging, we had to figure out how to actually navigate the book cliffs. So we were looking at topographical maps and hillshade, and we determined using washes as trails is probably the best way to do it. We talked to Corinne. She gave us some old rumors about cowboy trails that they used to move their sheep around, but we ended up creating a mock trail system that we could use while we're up there for the 2 weeks. Hopefully this would allow us to access the most diverse range of landscape, landform, climate, and ecological sites. So for this crew, we had Keith Crossland come up and do a detail with us. He's the MLRA Soil Survey Leader of Richfield, Utah. Kristi Mingus, who's my boss, MLRA Soil Survey Leader of Price. Dean Stacy, who's the Ecological Site Specialist of Price, and then myself, Soil Scientist of Price. This trip went really well. It was my first ever trip into the field as soil scientist. I learned so much about how the landscape changes and how soil changes with different vegetation, aspect, elevation. We took plenty of notes, and I personally felt like I had a strong understanding of desired map units of this area. This is a photo I took right there off the road facing south, so looking at this cliff, and then I actually ended up hiking up and getting pits along the way, and it was quite steep. I want to highlight a couple days during this trip that I thought were really awesome and I learned a lot. A couple of the challenges of the field work was the weather. While we went up in the first 2 weeks of May, it was super hot. It was extremely warm, and I had to bring a lot of water because we were just backpacking up these steep cliffs, and I was just drinking a lot. The terrain was extremely rough. We determined after hiking up around there that a significant amount of the survey area is inaccessible. And we had to cut off a couple trails because we couldn't get through the clifflands. These clifflands didn't have any access. And since we only had 2 weeks up there, we really pushed ourselves to get as many pits and as many notes as we could. And obviously there's wildlife issues. We actually did see a black bear. It was running away from us, thankfully. Saw bighorn sheep. They just hung out. We never saw any rattlesnakes or any snakes, and we only saw footprints of mountain lions, which is really cool. So here's the day I would like to highlight. Messed up the order, but this hike was crazy. So the Field Creek Station is right up here. Kristi and I started hiking from here. This was a theoretical trail that we made. We didn't follow it completely. We broke off when we thought it was better. So as we're hiking through, it was 7 miles, slightly elevation till the end where it was straight up. And I remember after about like halfway through the day, maybe 3/4, we get to around here and I'm very tired. I'm working with my boss 101 and I'm getting a little cranky, and I feel like I learned a lot about communicating on stressful days with your boss. Luckily enough, she was super kind and I learned a lot. We get through it. We hike up here, we get on this plateau, we actually get a pit up here, and we have to figure out how to get down. And luckily enough, there's a sweet route between 6 different cliff bands that we could just come down straight away, and we didn't have to hike all the way around. The second day I would like to highlight, stay with Keith Crossland. Since this is my first year, it was really awesome to get a different perspective, different experience from a different soil scientist, and have him come out and teach me was super nice. And this was just a soil I thought was really cool. Unfortunately, I don't have the best photo. This year I'm gonna work on taking better photos. It was my first gypsy pick. I've never seen that before. I thought it was crazy. It was a loamy skeletal mix, super active mesic, lithic, haplogypsids. So now that we did the northern part of the Book Cliffs, we had the southern part, which is this part, which is the Beckwith Plateau, and then the river portion of the Book Cliffs. So we could access the river by parking here and hiking 3 miles in and getting a small section right here, but that still leaves the top part, and all of this. And then in order to get to the southern part of the Book Cliffs, we have to wait for the river to get low enough, or we have to hike across. We ended up just postponing the southern part of the Book Cliffs for this spring, and then decided that we would do a rafting trip through Desolation Canyon to get all the pits along this on the cliff bands. So in order to do this rafting trip, we partnered with the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management. We collaborated with River Ranger Cam to prep for these trips. He helped us choose campsites and accessible areas to hike in and grab pits. So using this information, we created a 5-night trip that we could hopefully get all of this data and notes. Luckily enough, it only took a day and a half to actually get here. This is 40 miles from the launch site, which is super quick considering we physically could not reach any of this otherwise without a helicopter or something like that. For this trip, we had Kristi Mingus, the MLRA Soil Survey Leader of Price, Cameron Stark, he's the BLM River Ranger, Lucille Rollins, who's the soil scientist of Price, Utah. She joined us in August, and myself, which is the soil scientist of Price. This trip was awesome. We collected a total of 27 pet-on descriptions, plenty of notes. This helped me clarify a lot of my map unit concepts that I got from the previous trip. And we saw different vegetations, including cottonwoods, greasewood, Douglas fir, four-wing saltbush, Salina wild rye, juniper pinions. For the people who have done Desolation Canyon, we survived Joe Hutch and Three Fords Rapid. For people that haven't, at low water, it's these two large rocks, and Kristi was captaining the boat I was on, and she got through it perfectly. That was very exciting. It was a very pretty trip. This was a little funny photo I took. On one of the days, we were hiking up a wash to get pits. And we all split up to get different aspects, is to get different representation pits. And I realized I went to the north, and Kristi went to the south. I couldn't find her. So I took a photo. And if you look right here, she's actually wearing the bright red sweatshirt. She's actually right there. It's really hard to see. These cliffs were huge. I just wanted to illustrate that we were rafting. It was fun, but we're still getting pits and very difficult hikes, to say the least. This soil I really liked, the 21 UT 6590 63. This is my last pit from this trip. This is our last night out there. We set up camp right on this beach down here, and I actually ended up hiking to the first cliff band. So if you just follow this cliff band all the way to me, I thought it was crazy because I saw so many boulders, cobbles, just rocks everywhere, and I was really not looking forward to digging it. Digging rocky pits can be a little tough. I started digging it, and it was buttery and smooth. It was just all sand. So it was crazy to me. I was like, "What do you mean? We're so high up from the river." So I think it's alien. This was in Sandy Knolls. I'm still reading about the geology of that area, and I think that'll help me figure out why I have a mixed mesic ustic Tory salmon so far up right below this cliff band. So I thought that was really cool. So for the whole year, even though there was COVID, we really didn't have any issues for the most part. It didn't really affect us. We had 2 trips in with 130 site and pet-on observations. Working on 9 new map units being developed. We're changing line work right now and hopefully publishing this spring. Personally, this is my first year as a soil scientist. I feel like I have a strong understanding of soil landscape relationships and how the book cliffs really became to be. Moving forward, we're going to hit the southern part of the book cliffs this spring. I took this photo, parked right here, right before the reclaimed road, hiked up and around up here, and took a photo of the Price River. So as you can see, this road, we have to cross the river, the Price River right here, in order to access the southern part of the book cliffs. I'm really excited to do that this spring. And I would like to reiterate what my boss said. Please email Kristi Mingus if you want to hang out with us. It's a good job. I really like her crew, and the Ashley's really fun too. Any questions?
Thank you very much. That was a great presentation. And I think you kind of like doing it too. I hear good enthusiasm in your voice.
It was fun.
I'm not seeing any questions right now. So I just ask, so like I said, you obviously enjoy your work. What do family and friends say when you show them pictures of your outdoor office?
I don't have the best photos. I need to take some better photos. But they think it's crazy. They're like, "What do you mean you're up there doing that?" Because nobody goes to the book cliffs that much. At least this section, I feel like.
What are the main uses for the soil survey out there?
I'm assuming. I'm not sure, to be honest. Development for road uses. I don't know otherwise.
Okay, we'll just give it another minute here for any last questions. And I'm not seeing any more. So again, Kristi and Miles, thank you for representing Price well and your project work wonderfully. We'll be sure and post any other questions and your answers to them to the website. That concludes our Field Notes webinar for today, and look for you all at the next one. Thanks, everybody. Bye.